The first thing Xie Lin An did after becoming the top scholar was to break off our engagement. At that moment, I was still holding the hangover soup I had prepared for him. Upon hearing his words, I was stunned for a long time, long enough for the rim of the bowl to leave a mark on my hand, long enough for him to frown and softly call out to me, "Ah Yang?" I came back to my senses at his call, then placed the bowl on the table and gently said, "Okay." Later, I left the capital for 2 years. When I returned and saw him again, I respectfully called him cousin, then walked behind him and grabbed the ear of the young general who had just returned from the battlefield. "Bojian, I told you not to drink because your wound hasn't healed. Why are you ignoring the doctor's orders again?" Xie Lin An was the youngest top scholar in the dynasty. At the grand banquet in the imperial palace, he was brimming with youthful vigor, and during the street parade, the girls of Chang'an City desperately threw their sachets and handkerchiefs towards him. I sat in a private room of a tea house, watching him pass by in his bright red official attire, attracting a swarm of admirers. "Brother is coming!" Miss Xie Ruan, excitedly pulled me to the window, then shoved a sachet into my hand and playfully winked. "Sister Ayang, you should throw one too." I looked at him passing by below my window, who didn't spare me a glance. Gripping the sachet tightly, I eventually shook my head gently. "Let's go back home. Today, cousin is bound to drink, so let's go make some hangover soup." I returned to the Xie residence to make the soup. Yes, I was currently living in the Xie residence, and according to popular belief, I might be considered half a child bride of the Xie family. The engagement between Xie Lin An and me was originally a playful agreement made by our parents in our childhood, and no one took it seriously. But when I was 10, my father angered the emperor by speaking out bluntly and was demoted to a small county in Lingnan. Lingnan was full of miasma, and my parents couldn't bear to let young me suffer there. So they entrusted me to the Xie family. Lord Xie was the same age as my father, and my mother had been close friends with Madame Xie since their youth. Initially, I moved in as a cousin, but since there was no actual kinship between the Xie family and the Shui family, to avoid the emperor's wrath, they formalized the engagement. It was announced that the two families had arranged a childhood betrothal, and I would stay in the Xie residence until I grew up and got married. The Xie family was generous and trustworthy, but it was hard on Xie Lin An. So I tried even harder to be good to him, learning to take care of his daily needs with meticulous care. 7 years had passed since then, and Lord and Madame Xie were very pleased with me. Even Miss Xie Ruan, regarded me as her sister-in-law. Only Xie Lin An, who had been close to me as a child, had become increasingly distant in recent years. His change in attitude actually saddened me a bit, but I was always optimistic. Life was long, and people's true feelings would be revealed over time, so there was no rush. The hangover soup took over an hour to brew, but Xie Lin An still hadn't come back. Madame Xie had a carriage prepared and sent me to pick him up. I understood she was trying to foster our relationship, so I accepted her suggestion willingly. The carriage swayed as it took me to the largest tavern in Chang'an, Fenghua Tavern. The newly appointed scholars were already drunk and in a heap. I brought along a servant to pull Xie Lin An out from the crowd. Xie Lin An's tolerance for alcohol was actually quite low, and he was already very groggy. Upon seeing me, he instinctively frowned with a hint of irritated annoyance, muttering as if in a dream, "Why are you here again?" Heaven knows, in the 7 years I'd been at the Xie residence, the times I'd gone out to fetch him could be counted on one hand, the last time being nearly a year ago. This, again, was truly unwarranted. I rolled my eyes silently in my heart, maintaining the composed and dignified demeanor of a noble lady as I said, "Cousin, you've had too much to drink. Let's go home." Xie Lian vomited all over the carriage, but fortunately I had the foresight to have my maid, Ah Dong, bring a few bags. Otherwise, one of us would have had to roll off the carriage today. After vomiting, he quieted down considerably, leaning against the wall of the carriage, his head gradually tilting onto my shoulder. In his dazed state, he murmured, "You smell so good." Drinking really did make one lose control. It was truly shocking to hear such a flippant remark from the usually aloof and composed Xie Lin An. Ah Dong, sitting on the other side, teased me with a wink. I blushed and glared at her, but inwardly, I warned myself, don't overthink it. I liked studying medicine and often experimented with medicinal recipes or calming scents. Today, I had brought a sachet that could calm the nerves and counteract the effects of alcohol. He probably just found the scent pleasant. When Xie Lin An returned home, he fell asleep immediately, and it was impossible to get the hangover soup into him. His personal servant, Juye, and I fussed over him for a long time, but in the end, we gave up. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I said, "Take good care of cousin. He will have a headache when he wakes up from the hangover. I'll bring some medicine for the headache tomorrow." Juye also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Don't worry, Miss Shui." The next morning, I got up early, brewed some hangover and pain relief soup, and personally brought it to Xie Lin An's courtyard. I knocked on his door and heard his voice, hoarse from the after effects of drinking, with a hint of inexplicable panic. "Wait!" So I waited by the stone table in the courtyard for a quarter of an hour before Xie Lin An finally arrived. He sat down across from me, his demeanor formal and serious, and the first thing he said was, "Shui Yang, let's break off the engagement." These words came so suddenly. I had just picked up the hangover soup I had prepared for him, and I was stunned for a long time. So long that the rim of the bowl left a mark on my hand, and so long that he frowned and softly called out to me, "Ah Yang?" I came back to my senses and asked in a trembling voice, "Why? Why? Where had I gone wrong to deserve such rejection?" He seemed to understand what I was thinking. "I don't dislike you. It's just that I don't want a marriage arranged by our parents. Shui Yang, ask yourself honestly, do you really like me? I lowered my eyes, my eyelashes trembling, and interrupted him. "What if I said, I do like you?" He seemed unable to believe that the always reserved Miss Shui could say such a thing. After a moment, he continued somewhat awkwardly, "But Yang, I only see you as a sister. I don't like you." I smiled bitterly and said softly, "I know. I knew he didn't like me. I had always known. I once thought that time would reveal true feelings, but unfortunately, his heart was as hard as iron, unchangeable. I had tried my best, but since it was ultimately unchangeable, then let's just end it." I placed the bowl on the table and gently said, "Okay, let's break off the engagement." When Chen Tao, Madame Xi's maid, came to call me, I was collecting herbs drying in the courtyard. She was drenched in sweat and urgently pulled me along. "Miss, you need to go to the ancestral hall quickly. The master is going to beat the young master to death." It turned out that because Xie Lin An wanted to break off our engagement, Lord Xie had tied him up in the ancestral hall and was enforcing family discipline. I hurried over with Chen Tao. Lord Xie had already struck him once with a cane and was muttering, "Brother Shui is righteous and has a life-saving grace for me. Being able to marry his daughter is an honor for our Xie family, and you dare to break off the engagement?" As he spoke, another strike fell. Madame Xie was standing by, clutching a handkerchief and crying, but she didn't dare to intervene. Seeing this, I quickly shouted, "Uncle!" Lord Xie turned to me and said, "Hanling, don't worry. Your uncle will make this stubborn rascal submit and give you an explanation." Hanling was the courtesy name given to me at my coming-of-age ceremony 2 years ago, chosen by my parents far away in Lingnan and sent to Chang'an. Uncle Xie was very fond of it. Xie Lin An, kneeling on the ground with his back straight and his neck stiff, retorted defiantly, "If you're so grateful to Uncle Shui, then you can marry Shui Hanling yourself. You unfilial brat. What did you say?" His words were indeed excessive. Uncle Xie was trembling with anger, and I felt a chill run through me. Nonetheless, I stepped forward to stop Uncle Xie from striking him again. "Uncle, it's I who wants to break off the engagement." In the end, the engagement between Xie Lin An and me was broken off. The engagement token, a pair of Mandarin duck jade pendants bestowed by the emperor when my father became the top scholar, was returned to me by the Xie family. With the engagement broken off, I had no reason to stay at the Xie residence. However, I had already come of age and was an adult, so I did not necessarily need to live under someone else's roof to survive. Every time my parents wrote, they told me about the customs and scenery of Lingnan. I had never seen it, and I wanted to go and see it. In fact, it didn't necessarily have to be Lingnan. I had never seen anywhere outside Chang'an, so I could go and see anywhere. Although the engagement was broken off, Xie Lin An, out of spite towards Uncle Xie, went to stay with friends to recover from his injuries and refused to return home. Uncle Xie, furious, also ended up bedridden. So on the day I left the Xie residence, only Madame Xie held my hand and cried. Lin An is now favored by the emperor and has grown wings. Even his father and I can't control him anymore. I gently held Madame Xie's hand in reassurance and said, "Uncle and Aunt, please don't blame yourselves. I will always remember how well the Xie family treated me. And as for cousin, he has actually been quite kind to me. In the 7 years I stayed with the Xie family, he never mistreated me. He just didn't show the affection typical of an engaged couple. What fault did he have? He simply didn't like me." Madame Xie continued to wipe her tears, but I smiled with relief. When he told me he didn't want a marriage arranged by his parents, I thought about it for a long time and found it very reasonable. Over these years, we've been tied together by the engagement. I haven't met any other young men, and he couldn't get to know other girls. Perhaps I should go out and see the world. Maybe there's someone out there I would like even more. Please convey my message to him. The past few years were my fault for holding him back. I hope he finds a good match and lives a peaceful life. This was the last message from the 17-year-old Shui Hanling to Xie Lin An. When Xie Lin An returned to the residence after recovering from his injuries, a month had already passed. This month had not been easy for him. On the surface, he was a refined gentleman, but inside, he had a rebellious streak. The doctor had applied medicine to his back and given him numerous dietary restrictions. He agreed to all of them but refused to follow through. As a result, his wound worsened today and festered tomorrow, causing him unbearable pain. Zhu Ye, his personal servant, earnestly advised, "My good young master, our top scholar, please follow the doctor's advice and take proper care of yourself for a while, will you?" Xie Lin An, irritated, replied, "In the past, when I was injured or ill, it was never this troublesome." Zhu Ye sighed helplessly. "In the past, Miss Shui personally took care of you. She remembered all the dietary restrictions and made medicinal meals that were both delicious and beneficial for your recovery. We don't have that kind of skill." Xie Lin An was struck silent. To be fair, Shui Yang did take excellent care of him, but he was really unwilling to be forced by his father to marry the so-called benefactor's daughter, which was why he treated her so coldly. Now that he had calmed down from his argument with his father, he realized his words and actions that day were inappropriate. Maybe he should apologize to Shui Yang. Even if they were no longer engaged, she still called him cousin. So he queued up to buy osmanthus cakes from Ru Yizhai, rehearsing his apology along the way. From now on, they would call each other siblings, and he would still protect her. But Shui Yang had left. He frowned, puzzled. The Shui residence is empty now. Where did she go after leaving the Xie family? His mother, who always pampered him, for once didn't show him a kind face. The world is vast. Where can't she go? Then she poked his forehead in frustration. "You silly boy. You won't find another good girl like Ah Yang even with a lantern. Now you're clamoring to break off the engagement. You'll cry about it later." Cry? Impossible. There were plenty of good girls in the world. He wouldn't hang himself on one tree. But for some reason, his heart still felt somewhat empty. In a fit of pique, he tossed the osmanthus cakes aside. She really has grown wings and flown away. But how far can a young girl go? Sooner or later, she'll come back when she's had enough. At this moment, he did not expect that Shui Yang would be gone for a full 2 years. When I left Chang'an, I only took Ah Dong with me. I was good at medicine, and Ah Dong had martial skills. Though we were just 2 young girls, we managed quite well. We traveled and explored, and within half a year, we reached Jianandao, which was beside Lingnan. There was no other way. The terrain of Chuanshu was extremely complex. We got lost for a while and had to enter Jianandao first. As usual, we rented a courtyard in the local area and settled down. Then I started seeing patients to earn money, but one day, on our way out, we found a man. It was a very cliched scenario, but I still saved him. The reason was simple. He was wearing the military uniform of our dynasty. Ah Dong was a bit concerned. "Miss, maybe we shouldn't save him." I shook my head. "Look at the insignia on his uniform. He's from the Bo family's army guarding Minshan, a hero defending the nation." He deserves to be saved. His injuries weren't too severe, just some significant blood loss. Dong and I carried him home and took care of him for 2 days before he slowly regained consciousness. At that moment, I was changing his bandages. He woke up and instinctively grabbed my neck, his voice cold. "Who are you?" "Your savior." His grip tightened a bit, his voice still cold enough to freeze. "You'd better tell the truth." I rolled my eyes and said, "I've already told you that I'm your savior. If you don't let go, it will start to feel like you're repaying kindness with enmity." He glanced around the surroundings, seemingly finding nothing suspicious, and hesitated before releasing my neck. However, he still seemed uneasy, so he added a fierce but unconvincing threat. "You'd better not have any ulterior motives, or I will kill you." As he spoke, he lowered his head to check his wound, only to see my hand changing the dressing on his chest. The stern-faced man suddenly turned bright red. He quickly pushed my hands away, wrapped himself tightly in his clothes, and stammered, You, men and women shouldn't touch each other." "Oh, fine. Then you can change the bandages yourself." Already annoyed from being choked, I clapped my hands and left to see patients and earn money. The person I saved was Bo Rong, the youngest son of the Bo family. I had heard of his reputation back in the capital. Young General Bo had been defending Jianandao with his father and brothers from a young age. He was exceptionally handsome, but had inherited his father's stern, grim demeanor. The first part was true. After being cleaned up, Bo Rong was indeed very good-looking, but the second part was debatable. After a few days of interaction, this supposedly grim young general displayed quite a bit of a mischievous child's nature. "I'm a dignified 5th-rank general, and you want me to chop wood?" I calmly organized my medicine box. "You eat my food and live in my house. Shouldn't you do some work to repay that?" He clutched his chest and collapsed on the bed, rolling around. "But I'm still injured." I slung my medicine box over my shoulder, ready to head out. "All right, considering you're injured, tonight Dong and I will have fish soup, and you'll have stir-fried vegetables." Bo Rong sprang up like a carp, righteously declaring, "I was wrong. I'll chop the wood right now." He quickly rolled off to chop wood, and I went out with Dong to see patients. This scene played out almost daily. The first time Dong saw this, she was furious. The second time, she was puzzled. By the third time, she was numb to it. "Miss, do you think there's something wrong with his brain? He's done all the chores you assigned him, but why does he always have to argue with you before doing them?" "I don't know, maybe he's just bored." I've encountered many mischievous children like that in my medical practice. On the 20th day of Bo Rong's stay, I instructed him as usual before heading out to see patients. Chop the firewood, boil some hot water, and take the herbs from the west room out to dry. Okay. Such obedience was out of character. I looked up at him in confusion. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. After a moment, I understood and asked, "Are you going back to the military camp soon?" Almost forgot he was a young general. Bo Rong replied sullenly, "Yes. When are you leaving?" "Tonight." "All right, then I'll buy fewer groceries for dinner." "Shui Han Ling!" Bo Rong raised his head, glaring at me with wide eyes, though they were slightly red. I couldn't help but laugh. "What? Do you want to have dinner before you leave? You probably won't make it back to Minshan before dark if you do. Don't you have anything else to say?" He looked at me earnestly, and I gradually stopped smiling. What should I say? These 20 days had indeed been pleasant, but so what? Xie Lin An and I had also been childhood sweethearts, but we still ended up like this when we grew up. I no longer dared to easily give my heart, nor easily confirm a relationship. Besides, I had already stayed in Jianandao long enough. It was time to continue my journey to Lingnan to see my parents. So I smiled and said, "Well then, young General Bo, eat well and don't be picky. Let's meet again if fate allows." After another month, I finally reached Lingnan. I had written to them beforehand, so my parents weren't too surprised when they saw me. But after being apart for over 7 years, I had grown from a little girl into a young woman. My mother couldn't stop her tears when she saw me, and in the end, the three of us, along with Dong, hugged and talked for an entire day. Upon hearing about our journey, my father was greatly impressed by my medical skills and told everyone he met that he had a little divine doctor as a daughter. The local county magistrate, after having his ears talked off by my father, finally brightened up when he looked at the official document and said, "Brother Shui, we have few station troops here in Lingnan, but the neighboring Jianandao is in dire need of military doctors. How about letting your daughter become a military doctor?" My mother cautiously said, "Our Yang Yang is a young girl. It might not be appropriate for her to be in a camp full of men." But my father patted his chest proudly and said, "I can't speak for other camps, but in Old Beau's camp, there would be absolutely no problem." This was true. The discipline in the Beau family's army was famously strict, something even I, a sheltered girl, had heard about. My mother was still hesitant, but I nodded. Firstly, I would be thrilled to contribute to the soldiers guarding our borders. Secondly, I happened to want to see someone who was in Jianandao. On my first day at Minshan, I saw Beau Rong. At that time, Deputy General Chen, who was in charge of the military doctors, was giving a lecture to the new recruits. Beau Rong happened to pass by, and I winked at him. To my surprise, he didn't seem shocked to see me. He merely glanced at me and then walked away, as if nothing had happened. In his silver armor, he did indeed look quite like the cold-faced little King Yan he was rumored to be. I thought perhaps he was in too much of a hurry and didn't recognize me. So that evening, I made a special trip to his tent, only to be stopped by his personal guards outside. "Who are you to dare trespass into the general's camp at night?" I quickly explained, "I'm a military doctor. What does a doctor want here?" A cold voice came from inside the tent. Beau Rong then lifted the curtain and came out. I waved. "Hey, Beau Rong, it's me." "Who are you? I don't know you." Beau Rong didn't recognize me. It turned out that men were all ungrateful scoundrels. Thankfully, we hadn't developed any further relationship back then, or I'd probably have to break off an engagement again. I returned to my tent angrily and focused on being a military doctor. Upon arriving at the camp, I realized that my previous medical skills were far from adequate. There was so much more to learn. I followed the most experienced doctor, Dr. Hu, and was busy from dawn to dusk, leaving me no time to think about that ungrateful Beau Rong. Like me, there was another eager learner, a young doctor named Su from Jiangnan. He was gentle and courteous, very considerate. One day, we were passionately discussing whether horizontal or vertical cuts were better for bone scraping to remove toxins. Just as we were in the thick of it, a cold, resentful voice suddenly interrupted from behind. "What are you two doing?" Both little Su and I were startled. At that moment, our hands had been demonstrating different techniques, and his right hand was just over my left hand when we stopped. Beau Rong slightly leaned over behind me, staring intently at our intertwined hands. His gaze was icy, even more intimidating than when he first grabbed my neck. Little Su, with flushed ears, quickly moved his hand away. "General, I was just discussing with Miss Shui about the techniques for bone scraping to remove toxins." Beau Rong raised an eyebrow, and with a hint of menace, said, "Miss Shui, in the military camp, you must use official titles. Dr. Su, I shouldn't have to remind you of this, right?" Madman. Long after he left, Dr. Su was still in a daze. He clutched his right hand, which had almost been frozen by that icy gaze, and dumbly said, "Miss Dr. Shui, do you and young General Beau have some past?" I snorted, "No, I don't know him at all." Beau Rong was not only ungrateful, but also repaid kindness with enmity. In the dead of night, his personal guard came to my tent and woke me up. "Dr. Su, the general's old injury has flared up. Please come and take a look." I was quite puzzled, but I'm not on duty tonight. This is a military order. Fine, your camp, your rules. I got dressed, grabbed my medicine box, and went to Beau Rong's tent. He was leisurely sitting on his bed, wearing only a thin layer of white inner clothes, with his collar slightly open, revealing glimpses of his bronzed skin. I sighed wistfully. Alas, he was no longer that shy young man wrapped in clothes, saying that men and women should not touch each other. "General, where is the old injury acting up?" Beau Rong stared at me, his gaze especially poignant in the flickering candlelight. My heart. My hand paused as I opened the medicine box. I had a good idea of what kind of childish game he was playing. "Your heart? That would require removing your clothes, and since men and women shouldn't touch each other, you'd better find someone else, General." I picked up my medicine box to leave, but Beau Rong, in a panic, jumped off the bed and blocked my way. Xie Hanling! I raised an eyebrow and looked at him mockingly. Don't call me that, General. We are strangers. Please use my official title and address me as Dr. Xue. Bo-rong's momentum suddenly weakened and he slumped in front of me, saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I was just angry. Angry about what? He looked at me accusingly. When I said I was leaving, you didn't seem sad at all. Why should I be sad? It's only been less than 3 months, and here we are meeting again. But you didn't tell me you were coming to be a military doctor. At that time, I thought since he was stationed in Jianandao, it wouldn't be hard to find him. But I seemed to forget that he didn't know my identity. He didn't know where I came from or where I was going. He only knew that I was a female traveling doctor named Xue Hanling. I knew how to find him, but he had no idea where to look for me. Thinking about this, I felt a bit guilty. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have joked with you like that back then. Bo-rong calling me over wasn't entirely without reason. His old wound had indeed flared up. I pushed him back onto the bed, seeing that the wound on his chest was already seeping blood. If you're really hurt, why didn't you say so earlier? He said somewhat aggrievedly. You were the one who ran away first, didn't you? All right, it was indeed me who left first, but this was ultimately his fault for having a history of bad behavior. Fortunately, the wound wasn't too severely reopened. Applying some hemostatic medicine would suffice. I dipped my fingers in the hemostatic powder and carefully applied it to his wound. I applied the medicine meticulously and gently, fearing that I'd hurt him, so I took extra care. I didn't notice that he was already tensed up. As I continued, a bead of sweat rolled down his chin and landed on my cheek. I looked up in confusion. Are you feeling hot? Although his face was flushed, he stubbornly denied it. No. Then, with a pained expression, he added, But, could you hurry up a bit? I was taking my time to avoid causing him pain. He didn't appreciate it. I quickly finished applying the medicine. Some powder had gotten onto the uninjured skin, so I leaned in to blow it off, which elicited a restrained groan from Bo-rong. Ugh, I quickly looked up. What? Does it hurt a lot? He avoided my gaze and in a hoarse voice said, It's fine. You can go back now. I'll handle the rest myself. How can you bandage a chest wound by yourself? His voice sounded like he was about to break down. I can do it! Just go, please. Perplexed, I grabbed my medicine box and sleepily made my way back. After Shuoyang left, Bo-rong called in his personal guard, Baifu. Baifu, very perceptive, picked up the gauze to help him bandage the wound, but Bo-rong waved him off. Don't bother bandaging it. It'll just get wet soon. Bring me a bucket of cold water instead. Baifu looked at him strangely. General, it's so late and you still have an injury. You shouldn't be taking a cold bath. Bo-rong, looking utterly hopeless, sighed. Taking a cold shower might cause my old injuries to flare up again, but if I don't, your general here might just drop dead. Which do you think I should choose? He didn't quite understand, but it sounded serious, so he decided to follow orders. Bo-rong soaked in cold water for half an hour that night, finally quelling the shameful changes in his body and the burning desire in his heart. He exhaled deeply, then smiled bitterly. He had called her over, but in the end, he was the one who suffered. When her breath brushed against him, for the first time in his life, young General Bo was utterly defeated. It seemed from now on, he was going to be completely under her control. Bo-rong had become increasingly brazen lately, even going so far as to snatch my Mandarin duck jade pendant. The incident started when I was bandaging him, and my pendant fell off. He picked it up and examined it closely before shamelessly claiming, It's a pair, give me one. I was silent for a moment before truthfully replying, I gave this pendant to someone else before. He looked at me in shock. Didn't you say the engagement was called off? It was called off. I stopped mid-sentence, suddenly realizing, how do you know? Bo-rong relaxed upon confirming the broken engagement and then held the pendant. My father and Imperial Censor Xue were quite the adversaries in court during their younger years. Before you arrived at Minshan, your father's letter had already reached us. He mentioned his daughter would be coming as a military doctor and asked my father to take care of you. Shuoyang, courtesy name Han Ling. He squinted his eyes. Young divine Dr. Xue, why didn't you tell me you were Uncle Xue's daughter when you saved me? I genuinely didn't know. When old General Bo came to guard Minshan with his sons, I was only 4 or 5 years old and couldn't remember much. Moreover, my father was an imperial censor at that time, overseeing court inspections. He had countless adversaries in the court, and I couldn't differentiate who was who. But I suddenly realized something. So, when you first saw me and acted so calm, it was because you already knew I was coming? Yes, I was still mad at you then and didn't want to see you. But in the end, I couldn't resist and went to the military medical camp. Lately, Bo Rong had been pestering me to formalize our relationship and insisted I call him by his courtesy name, Xie An. I was exasperated by his persistence. Didn't I already give you the Mandarin duck jade pendant? What more do you want to establish our relationship? He said seriously, tokens are one thing, but we need a proper engagement contract to make it official. An engagement contract. That needed to be written by our parents. But he reminded me of something. My engagement contract with Xie Lin An might still be at the Xie residence. Bo Jian saw this as a significant issue, while I waved it off nonchalantly. No worries, Xie Lin An was eager to break off the engagement. They probably just forgot to return it. I'll ask for it back later. Bo Jian, however, was very serious. I think you're being overly optimistic. If I had such a wonderful girl, I wouldn't let go easily. Amused by his grave expression, I reached out and scratched his chin. Everyone has their preferences. Don't worry, Xie Lin An doesn't like me. He squinted his eyes like a big cat enjoying the scratch, but suddenly opened them wide. Wait, his name is Xie Lin An, and I'm Bo Jian. Shui Han Ling, do you have a peculiar preference for names with An in them? Crazy, I stood on tiptoe and gave him a light smack on the head. What are you thinking about all day? Can't you be normal for more than a minute? I stayed at the Minshan military camp for an entire year and gained a lot. Firstly, my medical skills greatly improved, and I was highly praised in the camp. Secondly, my relationship with Bo Jian also became more stable. However, because my marriage contract with Xie Lin An had not yet been annulled, he was still somewhat jealous. But fortunately, my father had been serving in Lingnan for 3 terms, a total of 9 years, with outstanding achievements. Additionally, the emperor, who had been somewhat isolated in the court with his unchallenged authority, finally remembered my father, who was known for his courage to speak the truth, and decided to recall him to the capital. At the same time, old General Bo was also ordered to return to the capital to report on his duties. This was a great opportunity to retrieve my marriage contract with Xie Lin An and formalize my engagement with Bo Jian. So, we each accompanied our respective fathers and embarked on the journey back to the capital. There were many things to arrange in the camp, so I left a bit earlier than Bo Rong. When I was about to leave, he clung to me, reluctant to let go, even wanting to leave with me under the guise of escorting Uncle Shui's family. Unfortunately, General Bo knew his son all too well and rolled his eyes. Escort Uncle Shui? Is that really escorting? Your intentions are clearly elsewhere. The relationship between Bo Rong and me was no longer a secret. Half of the Minshan military camp knew we were getting engaged, and both of our families were pleased with the arrangement. But this trip to the capital was an official duty. The emperor's decree specifically mentioned Bo Rong's name, so it would be inappropriate for him not to accompany the main group. He had to accept this reality, albeit reluctantly. On the day my parents arrived at Minshan to pick me up, they chatted with General Bo in the main tent, while Bo Rong came to my tent to help me pack my belongings. As he busily packed, he kept reminding me, "I've packed all your usual medicines for you. They're in the yellow bundle in the second carriage. The climate in the capital is colder, so take a few more warm clothes. I've instructed the drivers and guards your father brought. The terrain in Chuanshu is complicated. When you go back, don't take the Qianzhong Road. Take the Shannon Road instead." I sat calmly at the table, resting my chin on my hand, watching him bustle around my tent and chatter nonstop. Unconsciously, I smiled with my eyes curved. "Bo Jian." "Yes? What's the matter?" He turned back to look at me in confusion, and I shook my head. "Nothing. I just wanted to call you. I just wanted to call you and hear your response, as it made me feel particularly at ease." Thinking about not being able to see you for a long time makes my heart feel like a small piece is missing, leaving an empty, unsettled feeling. Not even having left yet, I was already starting to miss him. So this is what it feels like to like someone. As Bo Rong tied up the last bundle, I handed him a cup of tea and smiled. "Thank you for your hard work, young General Bo." He took a sip to soothe his throat from my hand, then reached out and pinched my cheek, dissatisfied. "Shui Hanling, I've been busy all this time. Don't you have anything you want to say to me?" What should I say? With departure imminent, it seemed like everything and nothing needed to be said. In the silence, he suddenly flared up. "You ungrateful girl, don't tell me you're just going to tell me to eat well and not be picky again? Let me tell you, Shui Hanling." His voice abruptly stopped, because on a sudden impulse, I stood on tiptoe and planted a light kiss on his cheek. Everything around us seemed to pause with that gentle touch. Watching his dumbfounded expression and the growing redness of his ears, I said seriously, "Bo Jian, I'll be waiting for you in Chang'an." We had been back in the capital for only a day, and our old residence wasn't even properly settled yet when we received a basket full of invitations. Some were from my father's old colleagues, others from my mother's close friends. Father declined all but the one from the Xie family. Regardless, back then, they were willing to take you into their residence at the risk of incurring the emperor's wrath in his fury. We must remember this kindness. Mother agreed. Though you and Lin An weren't destined to be together, the Xie family took care of you for 7 years. We should go and thank them properly. But before we could prepare gifts and visit, Lord Xie brought his entire family to pay us a visit. Father wanted to express his gratitude, but was stopped by Uncle Xie. When I was falsely accused and imprisoned back then, if not for Brother Xie's righteous words, I wouldn't be where I am today. This is merely repaying a favor. How can I accept thanks? Father shook his head. Back then, as the chief inspector, it was my duty to speak out. It wasn't a personal favor. While the elders chatted, Xie Ruan sat beside me, holding my hand and explaining. "Sister Ah Young, my brother has been very busy with urgent tasks recently. He couldn't come, but he'll visit you alone later." He didn't want to see me. Understandable, and using work as an excuse was a perfectly polite explanation. I expressed my understanding. "It's fine. He is busy with official duties now. There's no need for him to come specially." Xie Ruan waved her hand. "I'm not just being polite. He's genuinely tied up. If the emperor hadn't specifically assigned him to this task, he would have flown over long ago." She then leaned in and whispered in my ear. "To tell you secretly, over the past 2 years, the ones who talked about you the most were my mother and me. But I think my brother missed you the most. Every time you wrote a letter, he was the first to read it. Zhuye even said that when he gets drunk, he often calls your name." She leaned back in her chair, sighing like an old sage despite her young age. Alas, men are like that. They only cherish what they have after losing it. I laughed and knocked on her head. "Stop reading those romance storybooks. You're too young to think about such things." She held her head and protested. "I'm telling the truth. He must miss you, otherwise—" "Oof." Her sudden loud voice drew the attention of the elders. Quickly, I grabbed a piece of cake and stuffed it into her mouth. Then I looked up at the elders with an awkward smile. "Ruan seems a bit hungry. How about we have a meal together?" Aunt Xie and Ruan definitely missed me. I believed that. As for Xie Lin An, maybe he did miss me. Even though he didn't love me, we lived under the same roof for 7 years, so there must be some sibling bond. But that was different from love. The marching speed was indeed faster than ours. I had been back in the capital for only 5 days when the Bo family army arrived in Chang'an. That day, Xie Ruan rented a private room in a tea house again and dragged me out to watch the commotion. Because this was a debriefing, they only brought 1,000 soldiers. But walking through the streets of Chang'an, it still looked quite grand. Border heroes are always particularly respected, and these were all young, handsome soldiers. So the girls of Chang'an went crazy again, creating a scene no less impressive than the parade of the top scholar. Bo Rong, in his silver helmet, rode a white horse at the front, becoming the primary target for sachets and handkerchiefs. I watched his approaching silver figure, tall and stern, seemingly indifferent to the bustling crowd around him. No wonder he was called the cold-faced little King Yan. For the first time, I clearly realized that he was the young general who once single-handedly pursued the enemy for 1,000 miles, striking fear into the hearts of the enemy. But I rarely saw this side of him. Perhaps my gaze was too intense. He suddenly seemed to sense it and looked up. Unprepared, his familiar handsome face crashed into my view. For some reason, an impulse struck me, and I untied the sachet from my waist and threw it down. Although he was still some distance away, and the sachet wouldn't hit him, at that moment, I just wanted to do it. Unexpectedly, Bo-rong saw me throw the sachet, and after a moment of surprise, he spurred his horse and leaped, precisely identifying the herbal scent amidst all the floral fragrances, catching it in his hand before landing back on his horse. The entire motion was fluid and graceful, earning cheers from the crowd. Amidst the cheers, he held up the sachet and gave me a triumphant smile. My heart skipped a beat. Amidst all the waving red sleeves, the young general had caught only my sachet, smiling like spring thawing ice and snow. I returned home, my face inexplicably warm. I barely ate a few bites before retreating to my courtyard. After catching the sachet, he had mouthed, "Wait for me tonight." So after dinner, I did nothing but wait for him in the courtyard. When he hadn't shown up by the time the hour of Shu arrived, I turned my anticipation into anger and stormed off to the Bo residence. The steward at the Bo residence said there was a welcoming banquet at Fenghua Tavern, so I stormed off there too. I hadn't expected to see Xie Lin An first at Fenghua Tavern. At that moment, he was drunk, leaning against a tree trunk in the yard and vomiting. I stopped in my tracks, and my first reaction was, if Xie Lin An, a host and a civil official, was this drunk, how much more must Bo-rong, the guest of honor, have drunk? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I was about to head inside when someone grabbed my wrist. Xie Lin An, eyes red from vomiting, looked at me. "Shui Yang, you finally came again. It's been 2 years since I last saw you. This again is quite inappropriate. Lord Xi, you're drunk." He was stunned by my words, his eyes reddening even more. "What did you call me?" Upon reflection, Lord Xi did seem too formal. Given the Xie family's 7 years of care for me, calling him brother wouldn't be too much. So I pried his hand open, hastily performed a bow, and said, "Hello, cousin. Goodbye, cousin." Then I rushed into the private room and grabbed Bo-rong by the ear amidst the wine jars. "Bo-jian, I told you not to drink because your wound hasn't healed. Why are you ignoring the doctor's orders again?" This welcoming banquet was mainly for the Bo family army from Minshan, most of whom I knew. Before setting off, they had repelled an enemy attack, and many were injured. It had been less than 2 months since then, so it was impossible for them to have fully recovered. As a military doctor, I hated patients who didn't follow medical advice. "Deputy General Chen, your arm doesn't hurt anymore, right? Captain Shu, that arrow wound wasn't deep enough, huh? You want it to fester more? And you, Baifu, has the cut on your back healed enough for you to drink?" With my roar, most of the Bo family soldiers sheepishly put down their wine cups. My anger hadn't subsided, so I turned to the civil officials present. "And you all, it's fine to have a welcoming banquet, but why the alcohol? Don't you know they have injuries and can't drink much? Can you think about the military doctor's feelings?" Under my fiery assault, the others scattered like birds and beasts, leaving only me and a drunken Bo-rong in the room. He had drunk quite a bit and was already in a half-drunken state, just hugging my arm and giggling foolishly, unable to respond to scolding or understand it. With no other option, I borrowed the kitchen at Fenghua Tavern and made a bowl of hangover soup to sober him up. When I returned with the soup, I was surprised to find Xie Lin An still in the courtyard. He seemed much more sober after vomiting, but was still not entirely comfortable, as his gaze was fixed on the hangover soup in my hands. Shui family's unique hangover remedy, everyone praised it. I sympathetically said, "There's more in the kitchen, cousin. Help yourself to a bowl." He opened his mouth, seeming to want to say something, but before he could, Bo-rong inside the room groaned and called out for me. I quickly responded and went in to give him the soup, not noticing Xie Lin An's face turning increasingly pale behind me. By the time Zhu Ye arrived to escort Xie Lin An back to the residence, the lively banquet had already ended, leaving his young master sitting alone on the steps, gazing at the moon. In the moonlight, his red official robes looked inexplicably lonely and desolate. Xie Lin An, the young grand academician who had achieved early success and navigated the political scene with ease, now resembled a bewildered child. Juye, I saw her, but it seems she doesn't want me anymore. Upon receiving the news that the Xie family was returning to the capital, he had been excited for a long time. He had prepared gifts early, ready to apologize and renew their engagement. Unfortunately, just as the Xie family arrived in the capital, the emperor summoned him to the palace, assigning him the responsibility of overseeing the welcoming ceremony for the Minshan garrison, along with the Ministry of Rites. The proposal had to be temporarily postponed. Yes, he had planned to propose. In fact, his affection for Xueyang had long been evident. From the moment she moved into the Xi residence as his cousin, he had unconsciously paid attention to her. Despite being a young girl living under someone else's roof, she carried herself with dignity and composure. Later, to ensure she had a stable place to live, they became engaged. His father had not consulted him about this matter, but had instead made the decision directly. Lord Xue once saved our Xie family. Now we should repay this kindness. His father had never understood how to consult others. Making him study, preparing him for the imperial exams, and arranging his engagement were all decided unilaterally. He hated this autocratic behavior, which made him resent the engagement as well. Although he was always happy to see Xueyang, he kept a cold and distant demeanor. It was as if accepting the engagement would mean submitting to his father once again. Years passed quietly, and Xueyang came of age. The Xie family held a coming-of-age ceremony for her, and her parents from Lingnan sent a courtesy name and a jar of new erhong. Everyone began to subtly suggest that she had grown up and they could get married. Perhaps influenced by these hints, he started dreaming about her frequently. The dreams were always filled with springtime romance, things he couldn't speak of to others. Seeing her during the day, hearing her voice, or accidentally touching her fingertips would evoke strange impulses. His throat would feel dry and parched, an intense thirst to bite her. Xie Lin An was startled by his own thoughts. A young man's instinctive reaction to this unknown, shameful emotion was to avoid it, so he distanced himself from her even more. On the day the emperor appointed him as the top scholar, he finally felt confident enough to defy his father. He broke off the engagement. He simply didn't want to be manipulated by his father, but he never intended for Xueyang to leave. During the 2 years she was gone, there was no sweet hangover soup when he drank too much, no thoughtful snacks when he stayed up late reading, no delicious medicinal meals when he was ill. It turned out she had long infiltrated his life, leaving no space untouched, to the extent that without her, his days had become utterly dull and uninteresting. He finally admitted that this was love. He had loved her all along. It took her 7 years to make him fall for her, but it took him another 2 years to recognize his own feelings. Unfortunately, it seemed too late. Because at the welcoming banquet, he saw Bo Rong, and the mandarin duck jade pendant hanging at the young general's waist was alarmingly familiar. With a glimmer of hope, he approached to inquire, and Bo Rong raised an eyebrow at him. "So you are Xie Lin An?" The two men stared at each other for a moment, each gleaning the information they sought from the other's eyes, and then their mutual hostility became evident. That day, the other guests at the banquet didn't drink much. The ones who drank the most were Xie Lin An and Boji An, intentionally competing in a drinking contest. Boji An actually had a better tolerance for alcohol. When Xie Lin An was vomiting in the courtyard, Boji An's face was only slightly flushed. But as soon as Xueyang appeared, the man who had boasted about being able to drink 3 more Strumpsen, Anne instantly collapsed onto the table, clinging to her arm and whining. Xie Lin An felt a surge of anger and frustration, but Xueyang fell for Boji An's act. She genuinely believed him, her heart aching for him. She went to make the hangover soup, the soup that once belonged solely to him, and handed it to someone else. The mandarin duck jade pendant that once belonged to him now hung at someone else's waist. The girl who once cared for him with such devotion now had her heart set on another. Her image haunted his dreams countless times, but upon waking, he was left with nothing but a sense of panic. He was terrified of this panic, but this time, he wished it were just a dream, hoping that when he woke up, she was still on her travels and hadn't fallen for someone else. Shuiyang, please, don't be so cruel. Lately, I had been running into Xie Lin An quite frequently. Just last night at the welcoming banquet, we had seen each other. And today, when I went to Ruizhai to buy my favorite osmanthus cake, I bumped into him again. I greeted him politely. What a coincidence, Lord Xie. Are you here to buy pastries from Ruizhai as well? He was holding a package of pastries and responded with a low, I glanced enviously at the oil paper package in his hand, which seemed to be emitting the fragrance of osmanthus cake. I remembered that he used to dislike osmanthus, but that wasn't my concern. I shifted my gaze from the pastries to him and said, by the way, there was something I forgot to mention yesterday. Our engagement contract seems to be at your residence. When would be a good time for me to retrieve it? He suddenly looked up at me, his eyes appearing slightly red. Does it really have to be taken back? I sighed and replied, actually, I think it doesn't matter too, but he feels uneasy about it. Xie Lin An's expression became even more peculiar, showing some pity and grievance. I quickly explained, he doesn't doubt your integrity, really. It's just a bit of childish jealousy. Since we are no longer engaged, it would be better to retrieve it. He stared at me for another moment, then lowered his head to avoid my gaze. I'm not sure where it is. It might be with my mother. He had never been pleased with the engagement, so it was normal for him not to know where the contract was. I nodded. All right, I'll go to see Aunt Xi another day to get it. After speaking, I focused on queuing. The long line was frustrating, and I wondered if there would be any osmanthus cake left by the time it was my turn. While I was lost in thought, Xie Lin An handed me his package of osmanthus cake. Don't queue up, take this bag. I was startled. Isn't this inappropriate? He must have come early in the morning to queue for it. He probably liked it a lot, so how could I take what he cherished? What will you eat then? I don't need it anymore. When I got home, Bo Jian had already been sitting in the flower hall with my parents for a quarter of an hour. He looked at me rather resentfully. Why were you not at home early in the morning? I went out for a walk and bought some pastries on the way. I placed the osmanthus cake down and mentioned casually, I ran into Cousin Xie just now. He said the engagement contract is with Aunt Xie, so I'll go to the Xie residence another day to get it. Mother was surprised. When the Xie family visited the other day, I asked about the contract. She said it had always been kept by Lin An himself and that no one else had it. I was also taken aback and then quickly understood. He's never been very attentive to this engagement. He probably doesn't even remember where he put it. I looked at Bo Jian with some difficulty, but he merely gave a knowing smile and used a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from my forehead. You don't need to worry about this anymore. I'll go and talk to him. Xie Lin An thought Shuiyang would come to the Xi residence to ask for the marriage contract, but instead, it was Bo Rong who showed up. It's just a piece of paper, Grand Academician Xie. Are you really that reluctant to let it go? Xie Lin An retorted, refusing to be outdone. It's just a piece of paper, young General Bo. Why are you so insistent on taking it? Bo Rong chuckled. Without annulling the old contract, how can we sign a new one? If I don't resolve this issue, how can I confidently propose? Xie Lin An's expression turned cold. The contract is still valid, so she's still my fiancée. What gives you the right to propose? Fiancé? That's just your wishful thinking. Do you dare to say that in front of her? Xie Lin An fell silent. Indeed, he didn't dare. He was the one who broke off the engagement, and now he was the one entangled in it. Naturally, he didn't have the courage. But to just let go like this and watch her marry someone else, how could he possibly be willing? I grew up with her. We were childhood sweethearts. She liked me for 7 years, Bo Rong. You've known her for only 2. Bo Rong shrugged nonchalantly. Time doesn't determine affection. Affection can be instant, or it can take a lifetime to develop. As he spoke, he took out a sachet from his pocket. Its scent different from ordinary floral fragrances, carrying a faint medicinal aroma. Bo Rong, somewhat smug, said, "The top scholar also parades through the streets, right?" Did you ever catch her sachet? Xie Lin An's heart tightened. Bo Rong was asking whether he had caught it, but he knew very well that there was no question of catching it. That day, she had never thrown the sachet to him at all. Bo Rong continued to boast. You didn't even dare to catch a sachet openly. This kind of affection isn't worth keeping. As for her once liking you? Her affection for you was determined from childhood with no other choice. But her affection for me is willingly given after seeing the vast world. In her heart now, I am the one she wants to spend her life with, and you're just a cousin she grew up with. You never even let her know that you liked her. Xie Lin An, what right do you have to compete with me? Most of the Bo family army members received some kind of reward upon entering the capital. Bo Jian was even promoted from 5th rank to 3rd rank, and the emperor personally asked if he had any wishes for a reward. He requested a marriage decree. On our wedding day, half of Chang'an came to witness, turning the city into a bustling spectacle. By the time we completed all the ceremonies, the moon was high in the sky. Finally, left alone in the bridal chamber, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. Bo Rong, standing behind me, began to massage my back, nearly making me fall asleep from the comfort. However, as I drifted off, I felt a chill on my body. I opened my eyes to find Bo Rong already stripped down to his inner garments. This was part of the wedding night rituals, I knew, but I didn't realize it would be so embarrassing. He kissed my forehead and then trailed kisses downward. He turned me over and over, leaving me feeling like my body was falling apart, while he seemed to grow more vigorous. I repeatedly begged for mercy until my voice turned hoarse. Only then did he relent slightly. Call me Brother Jian, and we'll stop for tonight. How about that? I bit my lip, unable to say it. He resumed his actions. Under his assault, I clung to the bed, managing to stammer. Brother Jian, please, I really can't. By the time he stopped, the dragon and phoenix candles had burned out. I was too exhausted to even lift a finger, yet he lay beside me, still unsatisfied, whispering in my ear, Tomorrow we can try. I snapped my eyes open. Try what? Try what? And tomorrow? No more tomorrow. Tomorrow I would move to the study and never sleep with him again. But when tomorrow came, I didn't even have a chance to get out of bed before he had me pinned down for another round. The night was too short, but thankfully we had many tomorrows ahead to spend together. This is the end of the main story. Next, I will tell you about the epilogue and extra parts. First, the epilogue. After our wedding, Bo Rong and I returned to Minshan together. In the 3rd year after our return to Minshan, my parents also came to Jianandao. 9 years of exile did not change my father's temperament. After returning to the capital for 3 years, he led the ministers with loyalty and courage, offering direct and honest advice, leaving the emperor utterly offended. Eventually, the emperor could no longer tolerate it and expelled him from the capital again. But this time, the emperor wasn't as angry as before. The demotion wasn't severe, and he sent him to Jianandao so our family could be reunited. Actually, after our wedding, the emperor had summoned both the Shui and Bo families to the palace. He said that if we didn't want this young couple stationed at the border, he could summon us back. Bo Rong could command the imperial guards in the capital, and I could join the Imperial Academy of Medicine. We ultimately refused. The emperor squinted at us and said, You are both young and come from prosperous families. Why do you insist on enduring hardships at the border? Bo Rong and I held each other's hands and simply said, To dedicate ourselves to the nation is our happiness. The capital is prosperous, filled with talented people. It doesn't lack a Bo Jian, nor does it lack a Shui Han Ling. But the border needs young and capable generals, as well as skilled doctors to heal and save lives. I've seen the snow and wind at the border, the scars of the soldiers, and the peaceful lives of the people. I am willing to stay there, to use myself as a shield to protect the peace and safety of the nation and its people. Next is the extra part, from the perspective of Xie Lin An. In the matchmaking circles of the capital, there was an unwritten challenge. Whoever could secure the aloof Xie Lin An would be regarded as the best matchmaker in Chang'an. Unfortunately, no one had succeeded yet. The most famous matchmaker, Yusan Niang, after her 17th unsuccessful attempt, once asked him, Lord Xie, what kind of girl do you want? At least give us a direction. A figure instinctively appeared in Xie Lin An's mind, but it was someone he couldn't mention. She was now the famous divine doctor of Jianan Dao, living happily with Bo Rong. One was a ruthless warrior, the other a benevolent healer. Yet the two inexplicably made a perfect match, and their prestige among the people was remarkably high. If word got out that Grand Academician Xie had remained unmarried for years because he loved young General Bo's wife, Dr. Shui, the rumor mill would quickly churn out dozens of storybooks. In truth, Xie Lin An wasn't opposed to marriage. He treated all the matchmakers with a pleasant demeanor, genuinely trying to move on from Shui Yang. But he hadn't succeeded yet. Shui Yang once said that she thought the marriage contract didn't matter, but Bo Rong insisted on taking it back. Bo Rong's concern was actually well-founded. Because Xie Lin An had indeed considered that, with the contract in hand, he could legally force Shui Yang to marry him. But that would make her very unhappy. He had already lost his fiancée, Shui Yang. He couldn't lose his sister, Shui Yang too. So, when Bo Rong came to see him that day, Xie Lin An took out the slightly faded red paper and in front of Bo Rong, tore it to pieces. After Bo Rong left, Xie Lin An slowly opened his clenched left hand, revealing a torn fragment of the marriage contract. The red paper was crumpled and slightly damp with sweat. He smoothed it out, revealing the name signed at the bottom, Shui Yang, Xie Lin An. He had once been fortunate enough to be engaged to the girl he loved most, but at that time, he didn't know. He always thought the world was vast, and there must be a better girl out there. He broke off the engagement, giving both of them a chance to explore. Later, she found someone she liked more, with whom she shared a deep bond. But he never found a girl he liked more for the rest of his life. There were indeed many more wonderful girls in the world, but there was only one Shui Hanling. And Xie Lin An only loved Shui Hanling. Unfortunately, he never got to tell her this for the rest of his life.